Hey there, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. And I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. The EduData podcast is your no-fluff guide to the data driving higher education. Forget about data silos and disconnected stacks. Timothy Davis and Jamie Boggs, two of Element 451's data analysis experts, bring you straight into the heart of the numbers that matter. With sharp commentary and rigorous research, our hosts break down complex data points and actionable insights you can use. Whether you're an administrator, educator, or just a higher ed enthusiast, EduData is your key to unlocking the data behind academia. New episodes drop every Friday morning, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search the EduData podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutsky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Today we're exploring the evolving landscape of arts education and the impact of artificial intelligence on creative fields in higher ed. My guest is Dr. Scott Cline, the Senior Vice President of Enrollment Management and Auxiliary Services at California College of the Arts. He'll help us understand how AI is shaping applied art graduate degrees at CCA to help prepare artists and designers for a future where technology and creativity continue to converge. Scott, so glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Ray, and wonderful to be here.
I want to start by asking, what's next for graduate education at California College of the Arts, especially within creative programs like the MFA in writing or other applied art graduate degrees, given the rise of artificial intelligence?
It's a great starting question. And right now we're seeing a whole spectrum of reactions to AI, thinking about how it's integrated into the curriculum. And it truly is a pretty wide spectrum. We have programs that are really feeling a pushback against it in many ways, as in the use of previous materials that have been done by designers, writers, thinkers for decades, to other programs that have really dived deep into it and are really bringing it into their curriculum in many ways, and then seeing what the actual reaction to that is. So we have programs, for instance, that are encouraging students to really use AI, talking about how you cite it, and then finding out sometimes that students don't cite it, and our students are actually pointing that out pretty quickly. So it's a quickly evolving landscape, I think, across our programs. But at the same time, there's not just one single answer to that question about what is AI, what is artificial intelligence within this design architecture and fine arts landscape that we're really seeing these days.
So that leads to my next question. How is CCA preparing students in creative programs to navigate and leverage technology in their future careers so they remain competitive and innovative in a rapidly changing digital landscape?
For many of us, it's not actually new. It's different in some ways, but not really new. You can go back 100 years and talk about the evolutions of craft, design, architecture, and we've seen technology jumps before. For instance, in graphic design with the adaptation of computers It used to be that you sat at a big table and you had a pair of scissors and a box cutter and you did tons and tons of layout. And everybody thought once, the precursors to Adobe came around that they'd all be replaced. And the answer was they weren't replaced. It just continued to evolve. And that has continued to happen every single time here within these spaces. And so in some ways, like what's happening today is a little different, but also not different at all. We've been seeing these evolutions continue throughout this process to really jump from new innovation to new innovation. You could talk about how filmmakers used to do things on tape, and then you involve digital spaces. You have the tools that used to take hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce that students would never have access to. And now they can, for instance, as well. And so really, I think it's the always evolving evolution and how this might change some things going forward. But in many ways, it's actually not new to us. And so it's not as scary in many ways. It's scary in a different way, but not new scary in some ways.
Well, how is it scary, then, I have to ask?
Without a doubt, there is fear within a lot of areas that this is going to replace certain types of jobs or certain types of work. At the same time, those work is usually not the most interesting thing when you talk about cutting edge design, architecture, writing. We don't have a lot of graphic designers who just want to make logos, for instance. They really want to be talking about how we communicate information with a logo, for instance, or with design. And that's not something that's being replaced yet. It might continue to evolve. We know it's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to get better and better. We have animators who, a lot of times, their entry-level position in roles could be what AI now is going to replace, for instance. But they weren't really all that excited to do that type of animating work to begin with. That's how you spent your first few years when you went into an animation field or a career or a studio. And there was interesting work, it was important work, but now it's able to jump past those entry-level components and really get to the meat of what they're really interested in doing about storytelling. And so again, it's about speeding up and making accessible things that used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or just wouldn't be accessible to large swaths of not just artists, designers, and architects, but society is large.
That leads me to think about the academic side of the house. And given all of this, how are your faculty members reacting to artificial intelligence, especially in programs, as you said, that traditionally emphasize creative expression through manual or tactile work?
I'd say by and large, again, it's a spectrum, but by and large, our faculty are really embracing it, like unpacking it, understanding it, know it's evolving to, and are comfortable actually in that evolution, that they don't have all the answers. All of our faculty are working professionals, for instance, while academics and teachers, first and foremost. And so they've seen in their own careers how technology evolves, and they're comfortable in that. They know that it's going to change. The interesting thing I've always found working at California College of the Arts in these fields, as also not a artist or designer by background myself, is when you look at what our students do as alums, and you go back, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, a lot of those jobs didn't even exist then. And so when you ask us, like, how are we training students to do this type of work when the guarantee is we don't actually know what their job title is going to be or specifically their work is going to be in 15 years, which is not that long of a time. It's really exciting because it's like this has always been the case is we're really pushing the limits here. And so when you have faculty in that space being comfortable with the unknown, really creative things can happen where they're like, for instance, we're going to try this. And some of it might fail. Some of it might not go well. And that's okay. That's part of the process to really figure out what does it mean for AI in this particular space and what does AI mean for these types of careers and what it means for society in general that these careers and these people have impact on.
That's so interesting to think that even before we were having this kind of conversation about AI, technology was having an impact on the careers of folks graduating from CCA in ways that are not predictable by the faculty. And one of the great things you probably have as an advantage is the fact that you do have faculty that are also working artists and professionals who are seeing that happen in real time. Based on that, in your view, Scott, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities you see that AI is presenting for arts education in terms of the future careers and really thinking about there are some fields that you train artists and designers in that have traditionally relied on a certain amount of the human touch regardless of the amount of technology. How what do you see as the challenges and opportunities there?
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, first and foremost, the challenges that we're all struggling with is the source of these models and what they're actually built on. And they're built on the foundation of not, if not hundreds or thousands of years of work from writers, designers, fine artists, and architects. And currently, it's not paid for. And the question is, well, what is the value of that previous work when it's being potentially taken? So, in a world where artists, designers, and architects, the value of what they do has historically been pushed down. People have heard the joke like, why do I need to hire a graphic designer to do a logo? I can just take something off the internet, or I can do something in, name your program or something like that. And it's been historically done this way. And so for AI to use this as a foundation for their models is a big challenge. And we're in early days trying to figure out what that actually means. On the flip side, what the means that this has the opportunity for is really bringing to the forefront and the accessibility of what this could mean for people who want to study and work in art, design, and architecture on the flip side. This involves everything from what used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars or just would not be accessible at all for people to do. And now they, for the first time, actually have access to it. When I did my doctorate program in educational leadership and administration, I really struggled with the writing part. From early days, I couldn't spell, I couldn't write, and then found out you could just hire an editor and they do really amazing work for you. But they cost a decent amount of money. And so people who have access to that type of resource can come off as potentially smarter, better, and more successful. But it's not because they are necessarily, they have access to those tools. And so what I think the most interesting thing for what our students are studying and what our faculty are teaching from a pedagogical standpoint is what this could mean for access. What does this mean when a student who doesn't have access right now to an art, design, or writing education can start playing with this stuff? What does it mean when they are going out there and designing for the first time, even if it's not the best design, even if it has its limitations, but they can start to dabble? And what does that mean then when for our students, what type of foundation do they have going into this? Not just in how you design in a world or do writing in a world that is now accessible by AI or augmented by AI, but what does that mean for the foundation of where our students start with that they can really build on and go for when they start with a foundation that they didn't have to spend 2 or 3 or 10 years, a decade developing first and foremost. It's all important. You got to understand the underlying. But what does that mean when you're so much further ahead because you actually had more access to begin with?
It's really interesting points you're raising, and it kind of leads naturally into a question about ethics and what it means to own something or to be paid for something. So, with the integration of AI into arts education, what do you see as some of the ethical challenges, ethical considerations that are needed to ensure responsible use for those students and understanding of those technologies by students at CCA?
We're in early days with this, and I think experimentation is okay. The interesting thing in talking with our dean of design recently, as I was traveling for our admitted student events, was how quickly our students, fellow students, can identify what is been done with our AI and what hasn't been done with AI. There's a sophistication level there that has been developed that is really telling about they're calling out other students that are using AI when it hasn't been cited, for instance. And that's an interesting quick evolution. And AI is going to probably get better and better and maybe harder to identify, but also the skill set of people to identify it will also get better and better. So the fear or the ethics of will we know or not know, it could be harder, and particularly for untrained eyes or hearing or touch, even as we take this to the extreme. But at the same time, the sophistication level of the humans get better and better. And so where this goes is still new days about citations, referencing back to, paying respects to the shoulders that we've all stood on. And without a doubt, that's not new. To think that, when I did my dissertation, that I was somehow creating this original work that wasn't built on hundreds, if not thousands of years of previous work. I didn't cite every single person that came before me in that. But at the same time, it's part of the process. You read, you learn, you understand. In this case, you're using AI to really digest a lot more information than you could ever do before and potentially get much further ahead. So you have to acknowledge that. And it changes it in some ways, but at the same time, I think there's a lot more fear out there right now than necessarily what it is. And a lot of that fear has to do with the unknown. The unknown can be scary. And when you don't know enough, that fear is there. But I think if we start to continue to unpack this, start to continue to explore it, and I harken back to that student story where in critiques, critique culture is very important in art and design. So the review by your fellow students and faculty is part of that process. There can be some tears involved too, but that's part of that creative process. And when you see that the students are seeing it very quickly and then having conversations about it, about what it means, when it's used, when it's not used, when it's used badly, when it's used well. That's really telling about the ethics of this because it's part of the conversation and it becomes less scary as you really engage with this more and more. I worry about the situations where it's the extreme, where you have somebody who says, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Or the opposite, where it's like, yeah, AI is going to replace all humans. I think there's a middle ground in there that is really exciting and interesting and doesn't have to be as scary as it does because it's not that much different than what we've done before.
It's interesting. There are parallels there. It's good to be reminded of those. And it is early days, but I'm curious. You just returned, as you said, from an international trip where you're meeting with very talented students who have been admitted to CCA and are considering enrolling in your programs over 100 years of training artists and designers, and really an attractive opportunity. What sort of questions are you getting from these students that you're meeting with now who have been admitted to the college and are making this consideration in the age of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think First is there are the questions about jobs and ROI and a fear, first and foremost. So that's a pretty common starting point for a lot of these conversations where they're like, take an animator. Is my career going to be replaced in animation studios by AI? Or graphic designers, where the question is my first starting job, going to be replaced by AI because people aren't hiring graphic designers anymore? Or photographers who would ask the same question, or architects. So that's a very common starting point for the conversations. And then it starts to evolve from there, where we talk about, yeah, that's maybe the first job that you might have, but were you really, really excited about that job? Most students aren't really excited about that first job. They can be excited about that first job, but they're really interested about what they're going to be doing 5, 10, 15, 20 years into their careers. And not today. And AI is going to continue to evolve. So I'm not Pollyannish about this. But what we're talking about is the tools and the augmentation for those first few jobs. And then how do you continue to evolve and build from there? So that's the starting point for a lot of those conversations. But the other part of these, through a number of different countries I was able to travel to and honored to travel to for the college to meet our admitted students around the world, and also with universities in those countries that we have partnerships with, they're all really pushing the boundaries of how we can use AI ethically and really tell the story. How can we augment it to do more focused work, to really build upon the foundation for the lower level things that might have been exciting before, but never really were exciting, and what can really set the new foundation for really creative spaces.
Wow, there's a lot happening there and a lot to unpack. And it leads me, I think, very nicely to the last question for our interview. As you meet with these students, what advice do you offer aspiring artists who are both excited and apprehensive about the prospect of, in particular, graduate arts education, where we are today with technology and artificial intelligence? What advice would you offer those folks?
Dive in and don't be afraid. It's really that simple. Understand it. Get more information. Play with it. See what works, what doesn't work. How you can continue to build your space of knowledge around this, because it's not unsimilar to building out your skill set with all the digital tools that were previously there, or the hours of work that might be required in order to do this type of work by hand as a craft-based medium. It takes hours. It's not something that you just listen to one podcast or watch one YouTube video or go to one class. It's going to be the evolution of your knowledge, and not to be afraid of it. You can question it. You should push back upon it. You should be a critical communicator about it, but don't be afraid of it. Fear will not be your friend in this situation, but if you do dive into it, if you build out your skill set, you're going to be well prepared for whatever the evolution of AI or the next version of AI, because that's the thing, is we're talking about AI today. The guarantee is it's going to be something else. Maybe it's a year from now. It could be even 6 months from now. But eventually we're going to be talking about something else that's going to revolutionize the way that we work and think and live. And it's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. And so that's usually my advice for all of these things to students, is to really dive in, really explore, become a consumer of this and all the other things out there as well.
Great advice and a great place to leave our conversation. Dr. Scott Cline, California College of the Arts, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us with your insights.
Thanks for having me.
The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.